Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Uncle Jimmy's podcast, where we sit down with real people who've walked through the fire and come out stronger on the other side. Today, we have the honor of sharing an incredibly inspiring story, one that reminds us all that no matter how dark the road gets, redemption, purpose, and hope are always possible. Our guest is Daniel McGowan. For 15 years now, Daniel has been living proof of what true recovery looks like. He's fought his way out of the grip of heroin addiction, rebuilt his life from the ground up, and turned his pain into purpose. As a certified alcohol and drug counselor, an interventionist, and a sought-after motivational speaker, Daniel brings a rare and powerful combination: the raw wisdom of someone who's been there, done that, and the clinical knowledge to help others do the same. He's here today to open up, raw, unfiltered, and 100% real, about where he was in his darkest moments, where he stands today with over a decade and a half of sobriety, and where he's headed next. We'll talk about the brutal obstacles he's faced, the resilience that carried him through, and why he refuses to ever give up. His journey isn't about surviving addiction. It's about thriving, helping others, and showing the world that recovery isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of something extraordinary. Daniel, thank you from the bottom of my heart for trusting us with your story and for being here. Listeners, get ready. This one's going to hit deep. How you doing today, brother?
Very good, very good. Glad to be here, and thank you for that introduction. You know, for a large part of my life, I wasn't getting introductions like that. You know, so I'm always grateful, and glad to be
No, that's
here.
awesome. So take us back to the beginning. What did rock bottom look like for you during your active heroin addiction, and how low did things really get?
Yeah, good opening question. Things, you know, my detoxes, rehabs, county jails, 2 prison sentences, homelessness, psych wards, literally controlled years of my life. Looking back, something was just kind of always different. I think I was just always wired a little different, right? We were kind of just chatting before we started here, and, started off just basic, drinking alcohol, smoking weed in high school. And that progression just kept going, where I noticed certain friends would have like that off switch, and like I didn't have an off switch. It was just going until I can't go anymore. And I was always trying to like fill this void, right? And as I continue to move forward in sobriety, I'm always looking back, trying to figure out what that void was, and I think that's like that constant journey, constant search, because I had a normal childhood, whatever normal is, right? But like, mom and dad loved each other. There was no divorce. There was no significant childhood trauma, but I always just kind of felt like something was missing inside, and drugs and alcohol kind of became that answer. And yeah, so like my lowest point, I guess if I had to look back, I remember, certain things that jump out to me would be sitting on the top bunk at Bayside State Prison here in New Jersey. The guy I'm sharing the cell with below me is an older gentleman who's doing a life sentence. Walked in his house one day, found his wife cheating on him, and killed her and killed him. And I remember sitting there that day thinking to myself, like, how did I get to this point? Right? Like I grew up in the suburbs of New Jersey, and like now I'm just involved in this life that, like, obviously I was able to adapt, right? But like, I don't belong in that world. I had every chance to succeed. At 22 years old, when my friends were graduating college, I was getting out of prison for the first time.
Yeah.
Right. Not because I'm any type of tough guy, any type of a badass, but because when I put a drink or drug in me, I just don't know what's going to happen. I just don't know where I'm going to end up. None of that. I'm going out for one drink. That doesn't apply to me. I'm going, I can tell myself that, but I'm going out until I just can't go anymore.
And is that how it would start back up? Like say when you would get sober, right? You would, say to yourself, hey, I'm just going to go out and have a couple of drinks.
Yeah. I mean, I would tell myself that lie, knowing it was a lie, but sometimes the truth hurts, and, to be honest, I really never got sober until I did, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I would go to detoxes and rehabs and things like that, but there was never any real effort there. It was kind of just like, things are getting hard out here. Let me go check in somewhere, get off the streets for a couple weeks, get a couple hot meals, take some showers, maybe call in my unemployment for a few weeks, let that stack up. So when I get
Yeah.
out of here, I'm back at it, and there was never really any, like internal motivation. All my motivation was always like external back then, right? Like I never wanted it for
Okay.
myself. I wanted it because, my living situation or a court date to make it look good for, or,
Yeah.
mom and dad said either you're
Mom
going or
and
you're getting
dad.
out of the house. And I didn't want to leave the house. So I said, okay, I guess I'm going,
Yeah.
and that, finally it's, later on, once that internal motivation kind of really kicked in, that's when I was able to kind of really grasp the concept and make some big changes in my life, but I mean, I remember numerous situations I was involved in that it was just like looking back in that time frame that it seemed normal, but then once you get some clarity and you just realize how abnormal it was.
Yeah.
I used to buy heroin in an area in New Jersey called Paterson, New Jersey, and it was, it's obviously, a drug area, not a luxurious area. I had a gun pointed to my head one night, and I remember telling that kid to go ahead and pull the trigger. And again, right, not because I'm any type of tough guy, but because I just wanted a way out of that misery I was living in. And it was like, please do me this favor right now. It'll be quick, it'll be painless, and I don't have to live in this living hell that I've been living in,
Yeah.
because I think that's the thing with addiction that like sometimes people from the outside looking in really don't understand. Normally that addict, that alcoholic, they don't want to live that life they're living. They're not happy about things. They're just in so deep that they just don't know how to get out, and,
Yeah.
and that's where I was. Like I hated the way I was living, but,
Yeah.
but I was just in over my head and just didn't think that like recovery was possible. Like didn't think that the life I'm living right now was ever possible. And I'm glad I was wrong about that one. Yeah.
And you just said it, you're a kid from the suburbs of Jersey, right? You're in Paterson, right?
Yeah.
Paterson's not the place to be, and explain that to people, right? So your habit, right, brought you to Paterson, and you're telling the guy, just do me a favor, right? Because the pain, right? I have friends and family that have been heroin addicts, and they used to say to me, I'm so far gone that I don't even get high anymore. I just want to feel okay. I just want to feel, I just want to be able to move, to function. And to think that people don't, and I think you hit it right on the head where people on the outside, right? Everyone thinks that addicts are the worst of the worst, and they're all criminals and they're bad people. And, a lot of those people made a decision, right? Whether it was because a doctor gave them some pills, let's say, right? They had a back surgery, knee surgery, and then that turned into, hey, I like how the way this feels. And but all along, right? People are just trying to fill, like you said, you're trying to fill that void, right? And some people just take drugs or drink just because the world is such a crazy place, right? Where you get that couple hours where you can forget things and not worry about life. Being an addict doesn't mean that it's the end, and I want to tell people out there that are listening, if you're active in addiction, that, I tell people all the time, when you got to meet addicts where they're at, right?
Yeah, sure.
Can't force them to get help. You got to meet them where they're at. Too many times people say, you got, like you said, your mom and dad, you got to get some help or you got to get out of the house, or, with an addict, you got to meet them where they're at. Talk to them like a regular, normal person, because they are, and, do you think, like you said, you suffered sometimes homelessness. What was that like?
It was tough. I mean, like growing up where I grew up, where like homelessness wasn't normal, right? Like, it was kind of frowned upon, that, you know what I mean? Sitting
Yeah.
outside of the suburbs, outside the store, it wasn't a good look. So I would have to kind of not be seen out in public. I remember it just kind of, going off into, I would hang out in the woods for hours, just wherever I could, right? I was at a point at one point where it was like, if you left your car door open, I was going to sleep in it. If you left your garage open, I was going to find a way in, just like whatever, whatever I had to do. I remember one day being in the middle of winter in New Jersey, just kind of being out there with nowhere to go, thinking to myself, like, I'm going to die out here tonight. Like it's so cold. Like I'm literally gonna die out here.
Yeah.
And again, I always go back, and I'll probably go back to this a couple times throughout this podcast. Like, grew up in the suburbs with every chance to succeed.
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing to kind of hammer home, and it's just to let people know that like addiction doesn't discriminate, it doesn't care who you are, where you're from, how much money, what kind of background you have.
No.
Oh, and there I was out in the middle of the woods in the winter thinking I'm going to die out here and almost like welcoming that too, which is just crazy to think. And again, like what void was I trying to fill? I remember 8th grade, I was like a big deal in 8th grade. I like to think, right? Like I played a lot of sports, had a lot of friends, all this. And then what happens? 9th grade comes, I go to high school and like, I'm not that cool anymore.
Yeah.
And like I see this, I'm in this big high school and there's all these cliques and like a lot of my friends from middle school are now like splitting off. And I'm like, wait, where do I go? Who am I? And that's where it started for me. I went to a party kind of early on in my freshman year. There was upperclassmen there. They were drinking. I started drinking. I got drunk. Everybody loved me. I said, that's it. There's my answer, right? I'm going to drink more Budweiser and smoke more weed than this high school's ever seen. And I did my best to live up to that. And again, that was my answer. That was my answer to like, where do I fit in? That was my answer to my self-confidence, my self-esteem, my self-worth. Drugs and alcohol, I thought, right, like gave me that in a false sense. And that I carried that with me, because again, in here, something was lacking in here. Something was missing in here.
Yeah.
Wasn't happy with who I was, on the outside. On the outside, it looked like I had everything together, but inside I was always hurting. And the drink and the drug filled that,
Yeah.
and just brought me to some really dark times, some really dark places. And something I use a lot is like, I think sometimes the recovery process isn't about becoming who we were meant to be necessarily. It's about like unbecoming all those things we were never meant to be.
Yeah.
Just getting back to who we really are. Right. Cause I was raised with morals and integrity and values. And listen, once heroin addiction hit, all that was out the window. I'm
Yeah.
ripping, robbing, I'm scheming, I'm lying, I'm cheating, I'm stealing, I'm manipulating, I'm doing whatever I have to do, right, to survive in that world. And that's not who I was. So
Yeah.
once I got clean and sober, I just had to get back to those values and morals and integrity that I was raised with, and getting back to who I really am. And that's the beauty of the recovery process.
Yeah, it is. And there's hope for everybody, And so the next question is heroin, right? It's notoriously brutal. Can you describe the physical and mental hell of withdrawal and how you pushed through those early days when you started getting clean?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what's worse. I don't know where to go, the mental or the physical, because like I couldn't do anything on my own without some type of like detox, rehab, jail. Like I needed to be forced to stop because on my own, I just wasn't strong enough to get through that physical or the mental. I think a lot of times like the mental can be worse because it's just longer, like, yeah, the physical's brutal, but you can kind of lay in a detox for a couple days and just kind of lay around, fight through the pain. But then you got that long battle of the mental, right? And, if we look at like an addiction and like a kind of a three kind of piece thing, right? We have the physical dependence, the mental obsession, and then the spiritual malady, right? And that spiritual malady doesn't have to be anything religious, right? It just gets back to like something's missing in here and I need to figure that out. But that mental obsession piece, that second part where it's like, okay, I'm clean, I'm sober for a week now, but like my mind is just thinking about it, 24/7. And fighting through that hell is the hard part, right? Because it's so easy to go back. It's like you'll be sitting there and it's like physically you're in pain, mentally your anxiety is through the roof. And it's like, I know that all I have to do is go over there, spend a few dollars, and I'm not going to feel like this anymore. And when you're in that moment to say, no, I'm going to sit here and just be in all this pain and fight through it. It's such a hard kind of decision to make. That's why for me, like my end was a 5-year prison sentence, right? Which I did 2.5 on and got out on parole. And that saved my life.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't stop on my own. A 7-day detox or a 28-day rehab just wasn't going to do it for me. I would get out and go right back. So when I had to go sit my ass down for a few years, right? Like by the time I was out of that situation, that mental obsession was gone.
It's gone, yeah.
So now the only thing I had to work on was that spiritual malady, right? What void am I missing that I need to work on now? And it was a lot easier when I just had to focus on one thing instead of the physical, the mental, and the spiritual, right? I was past that. Yeah. So again, like I envy people that are really able to go to like a detox or an outpatient or even like a quick inpatient, because I don't know, for me, I couldn't do it that way. I would get out and get right back to the same things I was doing, every time.
Yeah. Well, you got to figure, right? You go back, you come out, you're sober now, but you go back to the same community.
Yeah.
You probably go back to the old phone or the old, and you have all the numbers and you know where everybody is. So it's tough, and you can't just pick up and move. We're not wealthy like that where you can
Yeah.
move, halfway across the country. And unfortunately, you move halfway across the country, you're still going to find it too,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. At that point in my life, you could put me anywhere on God's green earth and I was going to find a bag of heroin somewhere.
Exactly.
It didn't matter. And I mean, the geographical change can help. It's always easy if you kind of have to. It's going to make it harder if you're in a new place and don't know anybody, because then you're going to have to put in more work. But again, like you said, not everybody's able to make that kind of move,
Yeah.
like people, places, and things. Like everybody's not able to change that. Sometimes you're right back into to where you were in the thick of the action. And again, you can get, if you want it bad enough, you're gonna get clean and sober in that environment too. I mean, I know guys born and raised in Camden, New Jersey, homeless in Camden, New Jersey, got high in Camden, New Jersey, also got clean in Camden, New
Clean
Jersey.
that too,
But
yeah.
it makes it a lot harder when you're right back, in the same environment that you just left a couple weeks prior.
Yeah. So what was the biggest lie you told yourself while using? And when did you finally stop believing it?
I mean, the biggest lie, right, was things aren't that bad.
Yeah.
I'm okay. I can manage this, and I think a lot of addicts, alcoholics, they really don't even believe that lie a lot, but it's like the truth hurts sometimes, and it's they talk about acceptance a lot in the recovery world. Acceptance is the answer to all my problems. And when you're in that grasp of addiction, right, to accept the fact that like things got that bad. I mean, it's hard to admit that. So we can lie and say, it's not that bad. I can manage this. I can turn this around. And it's all nonsense, right? Like
Yeah.
it's obvious, the powerless, the unmanageability. I mean, it's so obvious. And yeah, when I was able to turn things around was when I was just finally found the courage to just like really accept that and admit that, and that's, on that top bunk in Bayside State Prison. And this is the insanity of the addiction, right? It took me there to admit that, not the first prison sentence,
Yeah.
not being homeless in the woods, not being through, 7 detoxes and 10 rehabs and living in Salvation Armies and checking myself into the psych ward just to get off the street, right? That wasn't enough to say, wow, things might be a little out of hand right now, because we just keep pushing the start date back,
Yeah.
instead of just, okay, let me do this right now. Like, there's another saying, right? Like rock bottom is the foundation in which I rebuilt my life, and just accepting that your bottom is bottom enough, and not like, I think I used to compare a lot. It would be like, okay, like, yeah, I'm here, but I'm not as bad as him, so it's still okay.
Yeah.
And that's what can get people in trouble, right? Like, don't compare yourself to anyone. Like, once you put that shovel down and stop digging, then rock bottom stops.
Yeah. Yeah. And you got to look yourself in the, in the mirror. And I say it all the time, whatever type of journey you're on in life, when you want to get serious with yourself, look yourself in the mirror, have that conversation, forgive yourself, then you can forgive others. And then you can start on that path, because what did you do? Right. What was your conviction for that you got sentenced to 5 years in jail for?
Yeah, so I had a string of home burglaries, right? Because I needed money for drugs. I was unemployable. Let me just backtrack for a second, and I'll kind of lead up to that. So I remember one time I was in a county jail in New Jersey, and I called my sister for a commissary. Well, first I asked her to bail me out, which I knew was going to be a hard no, but I had to take that shot anyway.
You got to love family love, right? Tough love.
Yeah. And my sister was the only person that would even consider answering the phone for me at this time in my life.
Yeah.
I had her phone number memorized because I always needed it for something. My dad and mom definitely weren't answering the phone for me at that point, which I don't blame them, right? Like they needed to set their boundaries, and I totally respect that. And I called my sister, asked her first to send me some money for commissary, and she said, I'll send you this money, but I can't deal with you after this. Like, mom's sick and I can't worry about you right now. And like, that's where I found out my mom had stage 4 lung cancer. Right. Was from that phone call to the county jail, because it was like drugs and alcohol first,
Yeah.
everything else a distant second, including family. And growing up, I mean, I grew up in a family oriented household, but drugs and alcohol came first. And I spent like a couple months in that county jail. And when I got out, I would love to sit here and tell you I went and made things right with my family. But, I didn't. I went back to my miserable life I was living. And my sister tracked me down again and said, if you have anything to say to mom, you need to get over here and say it. You're running out of time. So I get over to the hospital. I sit on the edge of my mom's hospital bed and I pour my heart out. But, I was kind of like a little bit too late, right? Because my mom was so weak from the chemotherapy that she couldn't formulate a sentence. So all I got was moans and groans, and I left the hospital. I didn't have any drugs. So I went to a bar to get drunk, right? The next best option. And my sister tracked me down again and said, mom just passed away. Right. So like in that moment, right, I'm in active addiction. I just lost my mom. I was too late to the hospital to even hear what her last words were, and like today I can sit here and say, like, I know my mom was forgiving me. I know she was waiting for her only son to get there before she let go. But in that moment, I couldn't grasp that. The guilt, the grief, the shame was so heavy. Like, how could I not be there to hear what she had to say?
Yeah.
And that kept me out there, for an extra period of time. I remember my dad saying to me, do you want to be a pallbearer at your mom's funeral? And I said, of course, Dad, of course I want that. And I remember him telling me, not to embarrass the family, and I got so offended by that, but like, cause I needed the shock. What do you mean, Dad? Like, he meant don't show up high. Don't come with any of your, degenerate friends,
Yeah.
just be normal. I remember sitting outside the church the morning of my mom's kind of service. And, I remember rolling up the sleeve of my dress shirt, sitting outside that church, praying to a God that I'm not sure I even understood, let alone believed in. As I'm pushing that needle into my arm, saying, please, God, get me out of this mess. I don't want to live like this anymore. Right. And again, that's just the insanity of the disease of addiction, right? As I'm injecting my heroin, I'm saying, please, God, help me. I don't want to do this anymore, but like, I can't stop, and so fast forward, I'm, I'm still, my mom's funeral passes. I'm still in active addiction. I'm coming back from Paterson, New Jersey. Now, let me just rewind a couple days prior to that. It was the middle of winter in New Jersey, and I was standing outside the side of my dad's house on what had to be one of the mentally, emotionally just lowest points in my life. Like, I was so broken on the inside. And when my mom was alive, one of the things she loved more than ever at that house was her rose bushes. She took care of those rose bushes like they were, her children.
Yeah.
It's the middle of winter in New Jersey. There's not a flower growing anywhere. And what seemed to be the lowest day of my life, I looked over at my mom's rose bush and there was a rose growing. And I took that as like that. I'm still here with you. Don't give up. Keep fighting. And again, didn't get clean and sober that day, but I filed that away.
Yeah.
I filed that away. And I filed away that praying to that God I didn't really even believe in outside the church, praying for a way out of this mess. So when I'm coming back from Paterson, New Jersey one night with my friend, and we turn onto my dad's street, which is a dead end road, and I look up the street and it looks like the 4th of July with all the police lights out there, right? House is getting raided. Detectives outsmarted me. My friend says, do you want me to make a K-turn? We can get out of here. And it took me like 5 seconds to answer him. I ran that rose through my head. I ran that praying to that God through my head. And I thought to myself, like, where am I going to go? I'm just going to just go on the run, live on the run in New Jersey. I've been praying for a way out of this mess for so long. Like, maybe this is the answer. Like, maybe I just need to go up here and face this, and wherever this journey takes me, that's where I need to go, because I can't stop on my own.
Yeah.
So maybe getting thrown into a jail cell for a while is what I need. And I went up the street and I faced the music and, that kind of, it ended up being a 5-year prison sentence that I 2.5, I got on parole. But there's one thing I remember when I was in the county jail for a while before I got sent down to state prison. And, I started going to like AA and NA meetings when I was there for all the wrong reasons, right? Just to kind of get off the tier, take a walk. And, I remember one night, we were all sitting in a circle, and this older guy just came back from sentencing, and he looked at all of us, and he told us how he just signed off on another 25 years, right? And he was like 50 at the time, so he's either gonna die in prison or come home an old man. And he looked at all of us, and he said, "It's okay, guys, I'm finally free now." Like, and that just blew me away, like, because the mindset I was in right then was like, well, what is this guy talking about,
Yeah.
And he explained that like when he was out there so cold in the free world, right? Like his family wanted nothing to do with him. Kids, grandkids weren't a part of his life. But since he was incarcerated and he was working on himself and back in touch with spirituality and religion and all this stuff, like his children and grandchildren were a part of his life again. And to him, that was true freedom, no
Yeah.
matter where his living situation was. And I just thought that was so powerful, right? And like I kind of look at that like a lot like happiness, like that freedom's an inside job too. And we're responsible for our own freedom. And I think about that guy a lot, because there's really no difference between me and him except I was given a chance that he wasn't. And I just try to make the most of the chances I'm given. But yeah, that was just kind of like the build up, that prison sentence was like the end, but a whole new beautiful beginning that I didn't even realize at that time, and it really just turned my life around.
Yeah. So now you've got 15 years clean, right?
Yeah, 15.
So looking back, what surprised you most about how hard or maybe even beautiful long-term recovery could be?
Here's the I think the crazy part is, right, like it really wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. And if I knew that, I probably would have tried it a long time ago, but I didn't want to go through any pain, and that's what kept me in active addiction. I was afraid of that short-term pain. And I think that's something that we have to look at, right? Like we get through that. I think we do it backwards, right? When we're in active addiction, the short-term joy that drink or drug brings is causing long-term wreckage. We got to flip it and do it the other way. Instead of chasing that short-term joy to get the long-term wreckage, we got to go through the short-term pain that brings us the long-term joy.
Yeah.
Right? But we don't want to go through that short-term pain, right? I think it's like that instant gratification. Like if I take a drink or a drug right now, I'm instantly going to feel that, and that recovery process isn't the same. It's spread out throughout time. And the addict doesn't like that. We want results now.
Yeah.
We want to
Instant
take,
gratification.
yeah, we want to walk 10 miles into the woods and then take 2 steps and be out.
Yeah.
We don't want to accept that we got to walk 10 miles out of the woods. And for me, I was afraid of that 10-mile walk out of the woods. But I took it, I realized you're like, this walk is a fun walk out of the woods, right? Like it doesn't have to be this depressing, arduous walk. Like look around, look at the trees, enjoy the scenery on your way out of the woods. And once I was just able to and willing to put in a little bit of effort, take some suggestions and do some things that in the past I was kind of closed-minded to, the recovery process, it really wasn't that difficult. It was first couple months of incarceration when I was going through the physical withdrawals and the mental aspect of things on top of, being incarcerated and dealing with everything that comes with that. Yeah, that was a lot, right? But after the initial stage is over, it just wasn't that difficult. But the problem was in the past, I never gave myself that couple of months of really trying to do anything about it. And you want to talk about beautiful. I mean, they talk about the life beyond your wildest dreams and recovery a lot. And, I always joke around and say, not shoplifting for a meal was beyond my wildest dreams for a while. So I set the bar pretty low. But like, I mean, the life in recovery, I mean, it's as advertised. It's everything that's promised. It's every bit as beautiful as everybody says it's going to be. And I think what benefited me is I was patient. You know, I didn't try to rush things back. I didn't put a car on the road for a while. I lived with my dad for a while. Like I wasn't in a hurry to really get all these things back. I took my time. I made smart decisions, and you know, I'm married. I own a house. I have a son. I have a career. You know, I have like a really good life today. And yeah, I probably took a longer road, but and, you know, I got to where I needed to go. So it was all worth it. You know, I think when we build a life that we love so much, then everything we went through, it had to be that way because it had to be that way to get you to where you are.
Yeah. You've come a long way from, those days in Patterson,
Sure, sure. I
you know?
appreciate it.
So you became a certified alcohol and drug counselor. What drew you to turn your pain into helping others professionally? And was there ever a point where you thought to yourself, who am I to counsel anybody?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the self doubt has always been something I need to work on. Even now, you know, 15 years clean and sober, over 10 years working in the mental health substance use field. Sometimes I still kind of question when I'm in like, you know, meetings with, you know, executives and owners. I still like, do I belong here? Like, do I belong in this room at this table right now? That still creeps into my mind. The way I got kind of started in the field was I was going to a lot of 12-step meetings early on, and I was working a lot of just, you know, I don't want to say dead end jobs, but it's just like jobs that like I knew weren't going to amount into careers. I was just kind of doing whatever I could to get some money in my pocket, carrying tools for a carpenter, laboring for a plumber, like whatever I could get my hands on. And I started like, doing some like speaking commitments at these meetings, and had a guy come up to me and say, you know, you're really good. You're really well spoken. He was working at a rehab at the time, and he said he could kind of get me in as an entry level position, you know, and at that time that was everything to me. I never had a job with benefits or a 1K or a business card or anything like that before. So I was like really, really excited. And, he got my foot in the door, and I just been kicking the door down ever since. You know, I went out and got, my CADC, certified alcohol drug counselor. And, I've just really been able to carve out kind of a nice life for myself that I never knew was possible. Right. Because when I first got into the field, it was like, what else am I going to do? You know, I got a bunch of tattoos, and I got gaps in my job employment. You know, what else am I going to do? And
Yeah.
if he said he could get me in, let me see where this goes. And it's been taking me on a beautiful journey ever since, and I've kind of been able to branch off and do some things on the side with some intervention and some speaking, and just kind of trying to do some side projects and some things that, also, just kind of follow some other side dreams that I have. And
You're a writer too, right?
yeah, I mean, I'm a writer. I wrote a book, New Perspectives. It's a guide to finding inner peace in recovery.
Yeah.
You know, the great thing about the book is even if you've never suffered from any type of mental health addiction, you can still benefit from the book. You know, you can still get something out of it. It's kind of just like a guide to live in the moment and find some peace and find some serenity. I kind of, for years since I've been in this field, right, I've been saying, there's certain things I've been saying. And at times I've seen people kind of break out notebooks when I'm speaking and like, or say that again, Dan, I want to write that down. And I'm
Yeah.
like, and I just started thinking, I'm like, wow, people actually like what I have to say so much that they're taking time to like write it down so they can have it like forever. And I just started kicking around the idea, like maybe I could throw all this into a book. And what really gave me that motivation is, my son just turned 2, and I said, you know what, let me, I just started thinking about legacy as I get older now. And it's like, what can I kind of leave him? And it was like, you know what, let me go ahead and write this book. And if nobody buys it, that's cool. You know, one day my son will be sitting at a kitchen table, able to tell his friends, hey, look, my dad wrote a book. So, even if nobody even buys it, that's worth it right there.
Yeah.
And I got something that's mine. That's my work. And I just, again, I didn't do it for so long because of that self-doubt, right? Like, this isn't gonna work. What do I know about writing a book? And I think a lot of times as human beings, we need to flip that a lot. It's I think we spend a lot of time thinking about what could go wrong and not enough time thinking about what could go right.
Yeah.
And I was guilty of that. That kept me in active addiction for so long, that thought process. I kept thinking about like what was gonna go wrong and not thinking about, well, what if this actually works and I get this life beyond my wildest dreams? And that's
Yeah.
not gonna happen for me. I'll just sit here and keep shooting heroin, because nothing good's ever gonna happen for me.
Well,
And
look at that. You were given the opportunity, first to get that job with benefits and everything else. And like you said, ever since you've gotten it, you're kicking down doors, and you're not looking back. And that's
yeah,
one of the biggest things, you've been through so much with that, with addiction. And, for anybody that's ever lost a parent, I've lost both of my parents, and, it's one of the hardest things in the world to go through, never mind, being an active addiction. And it can be tough, and I can relate to the, two times, both my parents from, on their deathbed of, sitting there and watching them and going through that. It's tough. And I can only imagine, what you went through that day. But the thought of the rose and your mom's rose bush is one that's, sticking with me right there.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's like the push to like, hey, get your shit together. Let's go now. I'm still here. So Dan, how has fatherhood and marriage shaped your recovery? And
yeah.
do you feel like you're the husband and dad you always wanted to be?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's great. I mean, I guess I got a little later start due to years of addiction, right? I'm
Yeah.
45 years old with a 2-year-old, but I just kind of have to stay in better shape. So when we're on the T-ball field, I can, remind those early 30-year-old fathers who's in charge here still, but yeah, it's just, I mean, life for me, life is just constantly about purpose and finding that deeper meaning. And marriage and fatherhood have just given me a kind of different outlook that I didn't know was possible. When I was sitting on that top bunk at Bayside State Prison, I kind of said to myself, I started to accept the fact that maybe this is my life and I'm never gonna, have anything better than maybe a studio apartment, and I started to just like kind of be okay with that. And then once I, got into the recovery aspect of things and I started slowly getting things back, it was like it just gave me that motivation to kind of just like, what's going to come next? What's going to come next? What's going to come next? And, I still get nervous sometimes when I like when good things happen. Cause it's like, man, like, am I going to screw this up? Like, do these people know who I am? I'm just like, I'm just a heroin addict from Monmouth County. You know what I mean? Like, I've got in that kinda, like, insecurity of not belonging creeps in, like, my wife, when I first started meeting my wife and her family and her friends, it was just always like, what are these people gonna think of me, like, I got stories that could rock their world, like, are they gonna accept me into their world? That's still kinda, I think that's something that's just so deep rooted in me, like, that still creeps in sometimes, and, I was actually, you know, not quiet about recovery, right? Like, I think my wife's family and friends, like, always kinda knew I had, like, a checkered past, but,
Yeah.
like, just kinda recently, I've been kinda doing more things like this and really putting it out there, and I think lately, they've been getting the kind of full story that they really didn't know, and I said, "You know what? Like, I mean, this is just my purpose. This is something I just need to do for me, and I need to break that stigma and put this awareness out there more than what I've been doing, and whatever people think about me, it's like, listen, I know where I've been, I know where I'm at, and I know where I'm going. You can't say anything negative about me because I just said it all about I put it all out there. So,
Yeah, you've heard it all, you've said it all yourself. And, that's the great thing about, people need to sometimes, take a step back and realize about life, right? Is that you've been through all this. It doesn't define, it doesn't
yeah,
define who you are, but it also shapes who you are, right? It
sure,
shapes you
sure.
into the man that you are now, 15 years, sober. You're a father, you're a
Yeah,
husband, you're a homeowner,
yeah,
and those things, right? Think about it,
yeah,
when you're sitting there in jail, 15 plus years ago, You're probably saying to yourself, I can't wait to get the hell out of here. I'm going to go get high. And here you are now, you're doing big things, and it doesn't define you. It doesn't make you, who you are. It shapes you. And you have these stories, right, that you're going to be able to tell, whether it's on here on the podcast or, in your book or at meetings or in your everyday work where, you're going to inspire kids, right? Kids that are going down that path that you chose to go down, right?
Yeah.
And you can be that shining example and say, hey, look, you want to go through all that? I can show you, I can tell you what it's going to be like, but I can also show you and tell you, hey, if you do things the right way and, look where I am today,
Yeah.
You said, it took you a little longer to get to, to become a father and all that. But, sometimes life, you get delayed and it happens because there's setbacks. And sometimes, the comeback is better than the, is better than the setback. So here you are, doing big things. So, you got to take some time yourself, right? And smell the roses and look outside and see the snow and just know that, you're doing great things because here you are giving back, giving back your time, giving back your stories. And it's a great thing because, these kids nowadays, right? You could tell them stories and, I was in jail. You can probably see them perking up a little bit like, that to you and I, I'm 41, you're 45. That shit's not cool, right? But like you said, you weren't a tough guy. You had to do what you had to do. You ended up in jail. But these young kids think like, hey, going to jail and going to prison, that shit's cool. And, there's nothing cool about that. But your message of coming from where you did, right? Even the story you told me you were in Patterson. Now look at you, right? Did you think you'd be there, when the guy was holding the gun to your head? You think you'd be where you are today?
Never.
Yeah.
It's funny you brought up the kids, right? Because that's something I've been doing is I've been going and speaking from 6th grade to 12th grade. I've been working with a program down by me. It's like a narcotics overdose prevention education program. I could do like this whole speech, and then at the end, you guys got any questions for me? And the questions always is like, what was jail like? What was prison like? It's never about that's always what they wanna focus on. And like, listen, I get it. When I was in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, like it's just like, okay, what's this guy talking about? When's lunch? But if I could just, there's always one kid that'll come up to me afterwards and thank me or have some extra questions. And that makes it all worth it, just if you can help one person, but, yeah, it's the constant search for purpose. And now when I go into the middle schools and the high schools, that gives me that, that feeling of fulfillment and that like, I'm really, really doing something here and turning my struggle into a strength, right?
Yeah, and your strength, yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, like, I feel like everything I went through, like, I feel like there's nothing that can be thrown at me that I can't handle, like, I think like everything I've been through is giving me that, like that resilience and that ability to solve problems and that ability to just stay calm in high pressured situations and like, just trying to like turn that negative into a positive. And, I think that's the key to life is just kind of like we never have to lose, right? We can either win or we can learn. And if we learn from these negative situations and then we're taking that negative and turning it into a positive because we learned something from it. And then that just flips it and kind of makes you unstoppable. That's how I kind of look at it.
Yeah. And like I say, you take that negative, turn it into into something that's positive. I say it every day when I get up in the morning, if there's any bad juju or bad, energy, I'm letting it out first thing in the morning. I'm bringing in some positive energy and off I go, because the bad energy can, it can build up. It can fill you up. It can get in your head, your mental health. It can put you in bad places you don't want to. So Dan, I got a couple more questions. So if you could go back and talk to your younger self before things spiraled, what would you say to him?
Before things spiraled, what would I say to him? Maybe just listen to your parents. My parents were hard on me, which I think precipitated a little bit how hard I rebelled. And looking back, and again, I'm not blaming my parents for anything. They had my best intentions in mind, but
Yeah.
I would have just kind of listened to their advice a little more. They saw the road I was heading down. But for some reason, I was just so intrigued by that road I was heading down at, 15, 16, 17. There was just no stopping me. And all the warning signs were there, right? Like if I look at the way 16, 17-year-old Dan was acting, like it makes sense how 26, 27-year-old Dan ended was in state prison, right? Like all the
Yeah.
behaviors were there, and I just wish I listened to my parents a little more then, and the negative friends I was hanging out with a little less. But again, there was a void I was trying to fill, and that was that was unfortunate, but
Yeah.
yeah, I would have just told myself to trust your parents a little more. They got your best interests in mind, and you don't know what you think. Like if I'm talking to myself, you don't know what you think, because I thought I had it all figured out. I
Yeah.
thought I was so smart, and I had the answers, and I didn't know anything. So that's probably the main thing I would say.
So, two more questions. So, for
Yeah.
someone listening who's still struggling in addiction, what's the most no BS piece of advice you'd give them right now?
Yeah, hope. Just hold on to that hope, right? HOPE, hope. Hold on, pain ends. And that pain will end. We just can't give up, right? I think sometimes we give up too soon. Just keep fighting, keep battling. Fall down 10 times, get up 11. Fall down 100 times, get up 101. Just keep battling, just keep fighting, and the pain will end. But like, I won't sugarcoat it either. Like it's going to hurt. You got to put in a little work. If you're in active addiction right now, there's no way around it. In order to get clean, in order to get sober, you're going to go through some physical pain. You're going to go through some mental pain. You're going to go through some emotional pain. It's going to hurt. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be messy. It's going to suck. You can get through it and get out on the other side and be stronger because of it. Again, turn your struggle into your strength. But it's not going to be easy. You're gonna really have to kind of get vulnerable and talk about some things that maybe you don't want to talk about. For me, that was the hardest part. Like once I got through the physical part, it was like, okay, now I put the drink and drug down. Now, how do I keep it put down? Well, now I got to talk about all this, whatever it is. Like whenever somebody gets like, say you get a few days clean, a few days sober, right? And there's no physical opiate withdrawals or shakes from the alcohol, right? Like the only thing that drink or drug can be is a solution to something else, right? A terrible solution, but that's what I've always used it for, a solution to something, right? Whatever it is, guilt, grief, shame, loss, trauma, PTSD, anxiety, depression, boredom, complacency, whatever I don't want to deal with, that drink or drugs becomes my short-term solution for that. We just got to find better solutions,
Yeah, exactly.
and not use that drink or drug to numb or avoid or run from whatever uncomfortable feeling or emotion we're trying to run from. So that person out there still struggling, just face those things head on, and stop running. At some point in our life, we have to go through pain. We can't just always try to go around it. And that, I feel like that's what addiction is, just trying to go around the pain. And then that contradiction we talk about, it ends up just causing more pain in the long run anyway. So just face it head on and go through it. It's going to hurt, but you can do it.
There's light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just hope it's not a train.
So, finally, Daniel, after everything you've been through, what's the biggest gift recovery has given you that you never expected?
Yeah, I love that question. So when I got arrested and I was in the county jail before I went down to prison, my dad would come and he would visit me every week. Every week he looked older. Every week he left, he was a little slower. And again, this is coming off of me just losing my mom. And I remember saying to myself, like, I just lost my mom and now I'm going to lose my dad while I'm incarcerated too. Like, I don't know if I'll be able to survive that, the guilt, the grief, the shame, the loss. And I remember when my mom was alive, she would say this all the time, like, you're killing your father. That's what she would say to me. She wasn't even really concerned how I was affecting her. She was just so concerned about how much pain my dad was going through watching his son in active addiction. So fast forward, I'm working in treatment, at that entry level job I had, and I get a call from my dad's kidney dialysis center. And he said, your dad didn't show up today. And I said, what do you mean? It's kidney dialysis. He has to show up. So he was living in a 55 and up community. I remember me and my sister, we called the security booth over there. And they said, yeah, your dad's car's in the parking lot. and they asked us if, you know, like with your permission and then like a police officer present, we can go in there and do a wellness check. And I was working close by. I said, no, I'll be there in a couple minutes. Cause like, you know, deep down, I knew what I was walking into. So I remember opening the door to my dad's place, you know, and I looked right to my left in his green recliner and he wasn't in there. And I looked in his bedroom, the door was open, he wasn't on the bed. And then I looked to my right and there he was on the kitchen floor, you know, cold to the touch with the ham casserole that he was trying to cook the night before, still burnt in the oven. And again, this story, right? Like this isn't a sad story. This isn't a depressing story because when I found my dad passed away that day, we had 7 more years together and me in recovery for me to repair that relationship, you know? So when you say the gift that recovery brought me that I never thought possible, it was repairing that relationship with my dad because I didn't know if that was going to happen. And I went from being in that county jail saying to myself, am I going to be in here and having my dad pass away to having 7 more years with him to rebuild that relationship and for him to become my best friend again. And in that 7-year time frame, certain things happened, right? Like he said things like, I'm proud of you. And
Yeah.
he said things like, somebody else is proud of you too. And like, I knew he met my mom. Like he was still so torn up from her passing that he wouldn't say her name. He would
Yeah.
just say somebody else. But like, I knew what he meant. And, you know, that just meant the world for me, you know? And sometimes I'll tell this story when I'm speaking somewhere and somebody will start to get emotional and I'll stop them dead in their tracks and I'll say, listen, don't you dare. This isn't a sad story. This is the most beautiful story I could ever think of, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember going through his stuff after he passed, right? Just to kind of look at his keepsakes and mementos. And, you know, there's certain things he had that just made me so happy, right? I remember one Father's Day when I was in active addiction, I had no money, not even money for a card. And I remember on a piece of paper, I wrote to him, I said, Dad, I don't have any money for a present or a card, but one day I'm going to make you proud of me. I promise you that. And he had that folded up and he kept that in his wallet forever. And he had my first, when I got my first business card at that job, I was so proud of myself. Like I never had a business card before, right? Like that
Yeah.
was like you know, it's like a foreign language to me. You know, I was, you know, a 2-time prison convict, you know, heroin addict. Like I got a business card with my name and extension on it. And my
And I
dad
didn't
kept
and I
that,
didn't steal it.
and my dad kept that in his wallet. And
Yeah.
it made me so happy that because I knew he was so proud of me. And addiction tears families apart and recovery puts families back together. In a way, I was able to kind of make that amends to my mom by being there for my dad when he needed me the most. Because at the end, he was really, really sick with lungs, heart, kidneys. His organs were failing on all different levels. And I was there to make that time a little easier for him and kind of, you know, in a way make up for the time that I wasn't there to do that for my mom. And I know she appreciated that. So, you know, that gift of being able to repair that relationship with my dad, I mean, I could never put a price tag on that. And I'm just so grateful for
No,
that
that's
opportunity.
that's one of the, heart touching, things I've heard. Like you said, you were there 7 years with him. You're in prison thinking, hey, I'm gonna have to bury him while I'm in here, and
Yeah. It was tough.
and when, like you said, when you're going through your dad's stuff and you find your business card and the note you gave him when you were active in addiction, and
Yeah.
it's small things like that. You think that, hey, I'm grateful to be sober now. I'm grateful to be on the right end of the grass. I'm grateful to be doing what I love, helping people out. But I'm also truly grateful for making my dad proud. You know,
Yeah, man.
because it's tough. It's tough. And you've been through so much. And I just want to say, Daniel, with your honesty, your strength, and the light you bring to others who are still struggling, it's truly moving.
Appreciate that.
You've not only saved your own life, but you're out there every day helping save others. That kind of courage and compassion doesn't come easy, and it doesn't go unnoticed. You and I talked before, and I told you I had a buddy of mine who, I lost, my best friend. He was almost 20 years ago. His birthday just passed. He would have been 41. And I often think of the times and, you know, um, it's tough, but I love how you open your heart so freely, for reminding us too that rock bottom can become a foundation for something beautiful.
Absolutely.
And, I truly, truly do appreciate you coming on. You're an inspiration. I want you to know that, I'm proud of you. I didn't even know
Yeah.
you before this podcast, and I'm proud of you. I need you to keep shining that light for all the, kids that you're going to talk to, for all the, people that you're counseling, and the families that you're helping with the interventions as well, and never give up. I just want you to know that I truly mean it. This has been one of the, great stories that I've heard that I've been able to share now. That I'm going to be able to share with my listeners about you and just how you've done, you know, so many things in your short, 15 years of being sober. And like I said, I joke about it with you often. I've said it a few times about the gun in Patterson, but just
Yeah.
imagine how far you've come,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
And I think about that a lot too, right? Like what if he took me up on my offer that night, like,
Yeah.
and all none of this would have come to fruition.
Yeah,
That's why I'm just a big believer in everything happens for a reason. And
exactly.
sometimes we may not agree with that reason or even understand the reason, but at the end of the day, right, it's none of our business, right? We're not calling the shots.
No, exactly. Exactly. There's a higher power above, whether you believe in it or not, but before we close, before we end, where can people find you? Where can people find the book? Where can people, find you if they want to, have you come out and talk?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So the book is anywhere, online where books are sold, right? It's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Nobles, it's on Apple Books. Again, it's New Perspectives, a guide to achieving inner peace and recovery. You can punch that into an Amazon search and it'll pop right up. I have my website, newperspectivesupportservices.com. My email is dan@newperspectivesupportservices. If anybody wants to reach out, if they're suffering, need some help, or just need somebody to talk to, I'm always there to do whatever I can. And yeah, I'm just grateful to be here and always looking to help any individual, any family, any group, any way I can.
That's awesome. So, I appreciate you coming on, Dan. If for people that don't believe in second chances, well, I can't really say second chances for you, Dan. There's probably been,
Yeah, 20.
yeah, but, Dan's taken that, and he's been given, many chances, but it finally took. He started doing the right thing and got right and sober, and the world, turned, and he saw it. And thankful that you are sober and helping people out, helping families out, because we need more people like you.
Appreciate you. Appreciate the kind words that, 20 years ago, people weren't saying things like that about me. So I'm always grateful, right?
I appreciate you. Like I said, I really do. I appreciate you coming on, because I think in the world we live in now, kids coming up with everything so accessible, not even just the internet or anything, but just drugs in general. I think a lot of kids are going down that path. You have a lot of isolation for kids, and they turn into the wrong things, whether it's, smoking a little bit of weed or drinking. I've found that most people I know that drinking and smoking weed, turned into a lot of problems down the road. And they didn't have problems with the alcohol and the weed. It was bigger and better drugs that came next. So perfect. I appreciate it. As I like to end my show, peace and love, peace and love. Uncle Jimmy out. Thank you so much, brother.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate you.
Thank you.